So recently I was watching a video from the Petapixel YouTube channel, specifically the Petapixel podcast, and they were talking about the Lumix ecosystem and more specifically autofocus when it comes to sports, action, and wildlife photography. And they made a claim that was really confusing to me, specifically with my profession, in which they were talking about, they basically said, this isn't word for word, but they basically said that while the Lumix autofocus in the Lumix full frame cameras has improved a lot, it's still not on par and it still isn't good enough for a lot of the lenses that would be used for sports, action, and wildlife photography. In this instance, they were talking about the Sigma 300 to 600 millimeter f4, and it's just still not on par with the big three and Sony, Canon, and Nikon.
Yeah, they've got a lot of bases covered for photographic use for sure, just not that very demanding, very critical situation.
You can't shoot wildlife with any L-mount camera reliably.
If an S1II focused better, more reliably in those critical situations, I think it'd be a very popular general purpose camera, that could do sports and wildlife.
I'm asking them to make a sports and wildlife camera.
Yeah.
I found this particularly odd for myself and for the cameras that I use, and I decided to do a little bit of an experiment. So I wanted to talk about that. For context, my name is Kian. I am a producer for a company called One Beat Dance Brands, and I guess also now Varsity, since Varsity just acquired One Beat Dance Brands. And my job as a producer for One Beat Dance Brands is going all across the country to the dance competitions that One Beat Dance Brands hosts and making sure that we get high quality photo, video, and just content in general for these dance competitions. And it is a very, very fast-paced moving environment. And with that considered, I don't want to put labels on things because obviously dance isn't wildlife by any means necessary. And it depends on who you ask when it comes to whether or not dance falls under their sports category. I personally think it does, but that's up to people's interpretation. But it is definitely action. You can't take that away from it. So as a Lumix shooter myself, I was a little bit confused when I heard that, at least as of recent, people were still making the claim. I could understand it from previous autofocus models of some of the older Lumix full frame cameras, but not the recent ones. And before I actually get into the experiment and more specifically the work that I've actually done with these cameras, I want to give you a little bit of context as to my background when it comes to this, because I've been a photographer for many years, specifically with the Lumix ecosystem of full frame cameras. It is my primary ecosystem, so I can't necessarily go off of this video without having that bias. But to be clear, I have no direct business relationship with Panasonic Lumix or Panasonic or anything like that. They don't give me free things or anything like that. I am just a user of the equipment. And as a matter of fact, I have a Lumix S1RII right here. I'm recording this video on a Lumix S9. And the camera that I actually conducted this experiment with, I'm actually going to pull over right now, is this guy right here. This is the Lumix S1R Mark II with a 70 to 200 millimeter Sigma f2.8 lens attached to it. And I also have a side grip handle thing, which I highly recommend, by the way, regardless of what cameras you use. And like I said, this is the Lumix S1R Mark II. This is not the S1 Mark II. So this has also been touted as a camera that doesn't have as good of autofocus as the S1 Mark II. So keep that in mind. I also have this handle here because I do sometimes also grab video from this, but I'm not going to talk about the video on this camera. That's been covered much in previous people's reviews and such. So I'm not going to cover that. But with all that context in mind, I actually wanted to go ahead and jump into a Lightroom catalog that I have of one of my previous events, and the catalog from said event that, again, was taken entirely on my Lumix S1R Mark II and this 70 to 200 millimeter lens. And before I go any further and before I delve into the results that I got from this, I want to ask a question for anybody who might be watching this video, regardless of if you use Lumix, Nikon, Canon, Sony, Fujifilm, I don't care what brand you use. In regards to when you're taking photos, and specifically when you're acquiring focus, I capture photos in bursts, but regardless of how you shoot, what is an acceptable hit rate when it comes to photography for you? I want you to just get that number in your head. Is it every 2 photos out of every 100 photos? That's it's okay if they're not in focus. What's that number there? What's an acceptable number for you? Of course, we would all love if that was 0% for all of the photos are in focus and none of them are out of focus. But you know, that's a perfect world. And I don't think there's a single camera brand that can make it that perfect. So again, just put a number in your brain, and also keep in mind as well, I'm going to be sifting through a lot of these photos in this catalog. There's 3,332 photos total from just this catalog. I am not determining whether or not these photos are completely like the best photos ever taken of dancers, or if they're going to be published on the front page of Vogue or anything like that. The question is, are they in focus? And regardless of how you see some of these photos as I scroll through, I have manually culled through every single photo in this catalog. And unfortunately, I cannot go further into the details of each and every single one of these photos because I do not have the current like distribution rights to like just throw all of these photos like onto my portfolio or to just put them on the internet. Like I can show it like this because it's not really giving too much detail and it's not like I'm giving away the product itself, but I can't really zoom in to each and every single photo to show you whether or not things are in focus. So just keep that in mind. I would love to be able to do that. I cannot do that yet. I'm still waiting on approval, and that probably won't be happening very, very soon. There is one photo I can actually show you, though. It's this one, if you want to get a good example here. Oops, put that into fit, because this one was actually already on the social medias. That's like, this one's already been posted, so I can show this one. So just to give you a bit of an idea of like what in focus might be, depending on your definition, this is a photo of multiple dancers carrying this one dancer up. And I mean, again, as you can see, looks really, really good. The main subject here and the main action that's happening is what's going to be most important to be getting in focus. And I think the camera did a relatively good job. If it looks a little noisy, that's because the lighting conditions are never really optimal in these dance studios. So I'm at ISO 3200 over here. You can actually see all the specs over here on this side as well. And I got the subject in focus properly like I wanted to. I actually think it's kind of in line with this dancer over here, who I did also get somewhat in focus. And like, keep in mind, these are moving subjects. They're moving very fast and there's a lot of them. So it's really important that I get the shot and that I get the focus that I need for these photos. And this was actually one that, again, was already posted on social media. So I could say, at least, regardless of any of the other photos, this one definitely landed the focus where I needed it to. And that is what's important. And that's what we're going to be talking about throughout this video. And I also want to make another thing clear. I'm using Lightroom kind of just as a display and an example to really showcase this. Whatever software you use to edit photos doesn't really matter. This is just what I'm showcasing it with. But I also want to make it clear. I know Lightroom has like an auto AI culling thing as of recent, where it's like, it'll look for specific focus spots and it'll determine like, with AI, what's in and out of focus. I did not use that. I do not touch that AI section. It's just not accurate. It doesn't really work very well because I've had previous instances where they'll take like entire batches of photos that are in focus and say they're not good photos or they're not in focus. And like where it's clear as day that it was clearly in focus. And the same thing vice versa. I've had a couple of instances where we'll say a photo is in focus when it's clearly not in focus. And I have this entire catalog here where I am capturing single dancers. I'm capturing multiple dancers on the stage. I'm capturing, let me see here, because yeah, like a good example, entire groups here. And I went through manually every single photo to check which photos had proper focus acquired and which ones did not. And I was not generous in any way, shape, or form to my Lumix camera because I'm a professional. Like, I need to be able to make sure I'm landing the shots. And if I'm struggling with that or something is struggling along the way, I need to know. And I need to be able to bring that down as to whether or not this is like just some user error or if this is something with the camera's autofocus system itself. So just keep that in mind. I am not giving this camera or any of these results any grace here. So let's go back to that number I asked you about earlier, that hit rate. Out of, percentage wise, like out of every 100 photos, how many photos are acceptable? Like, what's an acceptable amount of photos out of that 100 to be out of focus or not in focus? Keep that number ready because I'm about to reveal the results of this. Because as I manually went through all these, I marked any of the photos that I missed focus on very clearly with the little X, like do not use thing, as you can see here, throughout all of these. So with that in mind, here are the results. I'm sorry if it took too long here. I just wanted to give context. Out of the 3,332 photos in this catalog, I missed focus to some degree on a whopping 46. Not 460, not 1400, 46 photos that I missed focus on. Here you go. That's it. Like I said, I went through every single photo here. I was harsh because, again, this is my job. I have used other like systems before. Before I used Lumix, I was using like Canon DSLRs. My company now actually still uses Canon DSLRs as like backup cameras. And for like the main photographers, not myself, but like an actual dedicated photographer on site, they'll still use like the Canon R5 itself. And I've actually struggled more with that Canon camera that I have with my current Lumix camera. Now that's probably because I'm used to Lumix as a brand, but again, I understand that this is not wildlife. And regardless of whether or not you think, oh, dance is so much easier to get proper photos to focus on because it's people versus animals, or like whatever you think about that, I can't speak to that because I don't shoot wildlife, at least not yet. So here's my results. Obviously, this is one catalog from one event. So it is not the most scientifically accurate thing in the world. But it was something that I kept hearing over and over and over again, that Lumix just wasn't on par with the other companies. And like, I can't say whether or not entirely, because I haven't used Sony all that much. I haven't used Nikon like at all. I can't speak to whether or not it's like as much on par, but even if it's not, is that what's most important here? Like, I'm going through thousands of photos and I focus on less than 50 of them total, less than 50 photos total. By the way, percentage wise, that is 1.4%, like just about 1 out of every 100 photos that I would miss focus on. So again, I hope this was informative. I hope maybe this helps out some people when it comes to their purchasing decisions. If you were looking into a Lumix, but you were like really concerned that you're going to do something like dance or sports or something like that, and you're worried about whether or not the autofocus will hold its ground. Here you go. Here's at least my personal use case of it all. Again, I'm shooting at usually anywhere from like 600 to 1,000 for my shutter speeds. I'm shooting at very high ISOs because I have to most of the time, at an f2.8 aperture at 200 millimeters, or like 70 to 200. So I do not have a lot of flexibility because of the shallow depth of field there. So it's crucial that the camera is able to hold its ground. And I hope that this gives you some comfort in that, at the very least for me, it has not failed me at all. And that's why I still use the Lumix cameras as of today for my work professionally. So again, I hope this was helpful and informative to you all. And if for the people out there, maybe Petapixel themselves, if any of y'all see this and would like to chime in, I'd love to jump in on the conversation. Again, this is not a scientific like thesis or anything like that. I just wanted to provide some of my own results, and I hope it helps some of you guys out there. So thanks for watching.